The brutal execution of Saddam Hussein was far more horrific than you think the world thought it watched justice. A dictator hanged, a chapter closed, and order restored. But what really happened in that chamber wasn't justice. It was vengeance in disguise. Because this wasn't just an execution, it was a mirror held up to a nation breaking itself in two. Everyone knows how it ended, but they don't know who was there. What they said, or what that silence after the drop really meant, says more about the executioners than the man they killed. The room was dim, concrete walls stained with silence. In the center, Saddam Hussein, flanked by masked men. But this wasn't a solemn proceeding. It was a lynching in disguise. The former dictator stood beneath the gallows, shackled, surrounded not by impartial witnesses, but by vengeful rivals. Some held cell phones already recording. Others couldn't contain their hatred. They hissed, they cursed, they laughed. "Go to hell," one voice sneered. Another chanted, "Muqtada, Muqtada," invoking the name of a Shia cleric Saddam had once hunted. This wasn't about law. This was about revenge. Saddam, moments from death, didn't flinch. He stared forward, stone-faced. No tears, no begging. Just a man absorbing the venom of those who once cowered beneath him. He asked a single question. Is this what manhood looks like? The rope was adjusted, tightened. A prayer echoed, fragmented, angry. Then a sudden drop. His body disappeared from frame. A loud crack, silence. But it didn't end there. Phones kept filming. Faces leaned in to capture the aftermath. Some kicked the platform, others spat. The footage, grainy and jolting, leaked within hours. It traveled faster than any official report. What the world saw was not dignity, but disorder, not justice, but fury. A dictator was dead, but the manner of his death raised a darker truth. Even monsters deserve a cleaner end than this. History didn't close its book that night. It ripped the page out and set it on fire. He had ruled Iraq with an iron fist. Gold-plated palaces, body doubles, murals painted in his image. For decades, Saddam Hussein was untouchable, a god in a military uniform. Then he vanished. Months passed, no confirmed sightings. Some believed he fled abroad. Others whispered he was dead. But on December 13, 2003, the illusion shattered. U.S. troops uncovered him in a shallow underground hole outside Tikrit. Dirt-covered, bearded, clutching a pistol he never used, disoriented, powerless. The Lion of Baghdad had become a fugitive in his own country. They dragged him out like a captured animal. The video of his discovery spread quickly, a soldier checking his matted hair for lice, his face hollow, his body limp. It wasn't just a capture, it was a global unmasking. He was flown to a secret location, interrogated, stripped of control. Every hour in custody chipped away at the image he had crafted, fearless leader, eternal ruler. Alone in a cell, Saddam was forced to confront what he had spent a lifetime avoiding, his own insignificance. Gone were the grand speeches. Gone the generals, the limousines, the endless applause. What remained was a man who once ordered executions with a pen, now waiting for his fate behind bars. And yet he kept his composure. Guards described him as proud, even polite. But beneath the surface, the silence was doing its work. The weight of defeat isn't always loud. Sometimes it settles slowly, like dust on a fallen statue. This was not just the fall of a dictator. It was the beginning of a psychological unraveling. A once mighty tyrant reduced to a prisoner, his past echoing through empty walls, his future already written. Before the gallows, before the war, before the tyranny, Saddam Hussein was a boy from Tikrit, born into poverty, raised in violence. His father vanished. His stepfather beat him. The only thing that made sense to him was power. He joined the Ba'ath Party young. Ambition burned in him early, By his 20s, he was plotting assassinations. By his 40s, he had climbed to the top of Iraq's political pyramid, not by chance, but by force. Saddam didn't rule. He dominated. He created a cult of personality so dense it smothered truth. His face was on buildings, currency, and TV screens. Dissenters vanished. Suspected traitors were tortured or executed on camera. Fear was his currency, and he spent it freely. But he wasn't a madman. He was calculated, strategic. He played the West and the Arab world with precision, posing as a modernizer to some, a strongman to others. He nationalized oil. He crushed opposition. He fought wars to cement his legacy. At home, he painted himself as Iraq's father. In reality, he ruled like a god, all-seeing, all-punishing. Yet, for all his ruthlessness, there were layers. He loved novels, wrote poetry, gifted children with sweets one day, then bombed their cities the next. A man of contradictions, a product of trauma, a creator of terror. He saw himself as a savior. The world saw a tyrant. His legacy is written in blood. Halabja, Dujail, Kuwait. Cities are broken, life ended, futures erased. And still, there are those who miss him, not because they loved him, but because chaos followed in his absence. Saddam wasn't just a man. He was a machine, built by fear, fueled by power, and programmed to survive at any cost. Until the cost finally caught up. It was billed as justice. A moment for Iraq to reckon with its darkest chapters. But the trial of Saddam Hussein was anything but orderly. Held in Baghdad under tight security, the courtroom became a battlefield. Judges were rotated like pieces on a chessboard, not for fairness, but for survival. One resigned after his family was threatened. 3 defense lawyers were assassinated in cold blood. The message was clear. No one was safe, not even inside the court. Saddam treated the trial like a stage. He refused to acknowledge its legitimacy. When told to remain silent, he roared louder. He insulted the judges, challenged the state, delivered speeches dripping with defiance. Sometimes he entered in a suit, composed and calculated. Other days he shouted in tribal robes, calling the proceedings a farce. And he had a point. The trial was filmed but heavily edited. Key testimonies vanished. Some witnesses were anonymous, their identities hidden. Evidence came from a past soaked in politics and paranoia. The line between accountability and revenge blurred with each session. This wasn't Nuremberg. There was no global consensus, no unified moral clarity, just a broken nation trying to put a face to its pain and punishing it in public. The trial dragged on for over a year, focused on the 1982 Dujail massacre, where over 140 people were executed under Saddam's orders. When the guilty verdict came, it felt rehearsed, predictable, a climax everyone saw coming. But justice demands more than symbolism. It demands integrity. And in Saddam's trial, what should have been a moment of national closure became a mirror reflecting deeper instability. What unfolded wasn't a legal reckoning. It was a politically timed performance, with death as the final act. The verdict was in, death by hanging, but when to do it and who would take responsibility sparked a storm behind closed doors. The Americans hesitated. They still held Saddam in custody, and some feared his execution would trigger a bloodbath. A trial, however flawed, had taken place. But a rushed execution? That risked turning him into a martyr. The Iraqis, on the other hand, were split. Some wanted him dead immediately, before his sentence could be delayed, appealed, or complicated by international law. Others, including prominent Sunni leaders, urged restraint. They knew what his death could unleash. Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki didn't flinch. He saw an opportunity, a powerful political statement to end the year, a promise fulfilled, an enemy erased, and most of all, a message to rivals. This is my Iraq now. December 30th, 2006. Saddam's fate was sealed. The handover was swift. U.S. officials signed him over in the early hours. There was no ceremony, no warning. He was moved in silence, through a corridor lined with armed guards, toward the execution chamber, a place hurriedly prepared for one task. The date wasn't a coincidence. It was deliberate. Iraq's most controversial son would die before the year ended, ensuring his name wouldn't live to see January. It wasn't about justice anymore. It was about timing, optics, control. Outside the prison, the country was on edge. Inside, the rope was ready. The execution had become a deadline, a man's death reduced to a political checkbox. And once it began, there would be no slowing it down. The machinery had started. The trapdoor was coming. In a quiet cell deep within a U.S. military compound, Saddam Hussein spent his final night alone. No lawyers, no family. Just concrete walls and the creeping knowledge that time had run out. He was informed of his execution just hours before it would happen. No outburst, no begging. He nodded once, then asked for a copy of the Quran. He read it slowly, page by page, until dawn neared. When offered a final meal, he refused. Not out of protest, but indifference. He didn't eat. He didn't sleep. He just waited. The American guards who watched him, some expecting a broken man, were surprised. He was polite, measured. One described him as braver than expected. Another said he seemed more like a professor than a prisoner. There were no tears, no shakiness. He walked with his head high. But was it faith, pride, or simply performance? Saddam had worn many masks: revolutionary, president, soldier, tyrant. Now, in his final hours, he chose one more, the composed martyr. Whether it was genuine or rehearsed, no one could say, but it unsettled everyone in the room. When Iraqi officials arrived to take custody, he greeted them calmly. He recited Islamic verses. His voice was steady, his eyes unblinking. It wasn't bravado, it was something colder, acceptance without surrender. As he was led away, he carried only two things: a copy of the Quran and the same defiance that had kept him alive for decades. Saddam didn't cry, he didn't shake, he didn't plead. And in that final stillness, the world saw something strange, not the crumbling of a dictator, but the performance of a man determined to control even his own death. It was meant to be controlled, quiet, official. The Iraqi government promised a dignified execution, no chaos, no spectacle. That promise didn't last 5 minutes. As Saddam stood beneath the gallows, cell phones were already recording, hidden in sleeves, tucked into pockets. Dozens of eyes behind screens, ready to broadcast history's most controversial hanging in real time. The room was packed, not with impartial witnesses, but with enemies. Men who had suffered under his rule, men who didn't come for justice. They came for payback. The chanting started slowly, then louder. Muqtada, Muqtada, Muqtada. They weren't just invoking a name. They were taunting Saddam with the memory of a man he once tried to erase, Shia cleric Muqtada al-Sadr. Saddam didn't shout. He didn't flinch. He stared at them and asked one question, calm and cutting. Is this what manhood looks like? Silence followed, but not for long. A hood was placed over his head. The rope was fixed. The insults continued. The prayer, traditionally spoken in unity, was interrupted. Saddam began the words. Others mocked him as he spoke. Then the lever dropped. His body vanished. A thud, a crack, then a pause. The room, for a moment, went still. But the phones kept rolling. Someone zoomed in on the body. Others cheered. Some spat. The footage leaked within hours, spreading like wildfire online, unedited, shaky, brutal. The execution wasn't just witnessed, it was consumed. No state seal, no moral closure, just pixels and vengeance, watched by millions. This wasn't justice. This was a viral killing, an unfiltered collapse of order, broadcast frame by frame. And in the end, Saddam didn't just die. He became a symbol, of what happens when justice loses its grip and rage holds the rope. Saddam Hussein was dead, but even in death his body refused silence. When they removed the hood, his neck was snapped, twisted unnaturally. A deep red line carved across his throat, the mark of the rope's final authority. His face was pale, but untouched by fear. Lips parted, eyes half shut. Some claimed he looked peaceful. Others said he looked defiant. A white shroud was wrapped around him, but rage had already soaked through. Not his, but the rage of those who watched, cheered, and recorded. There was no official funeral procession, no televised farewell. The burial was fast, quiet, or at least that was the plan. His body was flown to his hometown, Al-Auja, near Tikrit, under armed guard in the dead of night. Only a handful of trusted tribal elders were allowed to attend. They placed him in a simple grave beside his sons Uday and Qusay under concrete and sand. But secrets never stay buried in Iraq. Photos leaked, cell phone videos surfaced. A lifeless Saddam, shrouded in white, laid out in a wooden coffin. For some, these images confirmed closure. For others, they lit a fire. Across Sunni strongholds, his burial sparked quiet mourning. In Shia neighborhoods, celebration. Some danced in the streets, others wept in silence. The same man, one corpse, two legacies. To many, he was a monster. To a few, a martyr. His death didn't erase his image. It multiplied it. His body became a symbol, a battleground, a warning. Because in Iraq, even a dictator's corpse can divide a nation. And as the dust settled over his grave, one thing was clear. They had buried the man, but not the weight of what he left behind. Saddam was gone, but peace never came. His execution was supposed to be the final chapter, the closing of a brutal era. Instead, it set the country on fire. Within hours, sectarian tensions erupted. Shia neighborhoods lit fireworks. Sunni strongholds held funerals. The divide, once political, became violently personal. Saddam's death didn't unite Iraq. It ripped it deeper apart. Sunni insurgents saw the hanging as proof. Iraq was no longer theirs. Marginalized, targeted, humiliated. They retaliated with bombs, ambushes, assassinations. Every checkpoint became a gamble. Every mosque, a target. Shia militias struck back, often with more force. Backed by elements within the new government, they carried out raids, kidnappings, and executions. Sectarian death squads roamed the night, dragging people from their homes based on surnames, accents, and tribal ties. Caught in the middle, millions of civilians. Baghdad became a battlefield. Neighbors turned into enemies. Markets turned into morgues. Children stopped going to school. Families vanished without a trace. Entire districts were ethnically cleansed, block by block, house by house. American troops tried to contain it, but only became another faction in the chaos, a target to some, an obstacle to others. This wasn't post-war recovery. This was civil war by another name. And at the center of it all was Saddam's ghost, looming over a nation he once ruled, now tearing itself apart in his absence. The gallows did not bring justice. The rope did not bring order. What it brought was blood. For many Iraqis, Saddam's execution was not the end. It was the match dropped onto dry earth. And what followed was not silence, but fire. Years have passed, but the grainy footage remains, circulating endlessly online, whispered about in classrooms, shown in war documentaries, replayed in extremist propaganda. Saddam Hussein's execution wasn't erased by time. It became etched into it. He is still debated. To some, a butcher who got what he deserved. To others, a shield against the chaos that followed. His crimes are undeniable: mass graves, chemical attacks, fear as policy. And yet, his death did not bring the clarity many hoped for. Because the video didn't show justice. It showed rage. It showed a state unraveling under the weight of its own hatred. The chants, the insults, The cheers as the body fell. It wasn't an ending. It was an exposure. The world didn't just witness Saddam's final moments. It watched the people who killed him, their faces twisted in vengeance, their phones shaking with adrenaline, their voices louder than the law. And in that moment, a question hung heavier than the corpse. Who really won? Iraq did not emerge stronger. It bled. It fractured. The trial, the execution, the burial, they didn't unify. They deepened the divide. Today, Saddam's name is used for both mourning and manipulation. Rebels invoke him. Politicians avoid him. Families still argue about whether life under his rule was worse than the chaos that replaced it. But one truth remains. In trying to kill a monster, they became something monstrous themselves. The spectacle of his death revealed something raw, something many weren't ready to see, that justice without dignity becomes vengeance. And when vengeance becomes policy, there are no heroes, only hangmen.